Good evening, everyone. Today we'll be talking about Smart Monthly Budget Suggestion System. So our system analyzes users' income and spending patterns to offer personalized budgeting recommendations. So by providing easy to use financial tools, it helps users optimize savings and achieve their financial goals efficiently. So explaining this project, we have a use case diagram which briefly mentions about the uses. So we have two actors, the user and the database. So the user casually inputs the financial data, be it the income or the other miscellaneous expenses. And then later the system generates the budget. Simultaneously, the system also tracks the spending of the user. And you can, if you want to, you can view the financial summary. So notification alerts are also generated by the system in case you cross the threshold of your expenses. So moving on to sequence diagram, this shows how the user inputs are processed and how the system generates budget suggestions and how these suggestions are presented back to the user. So scenario one, you have user and financial input financial data. So here basically you can see the interaction between the user and the system and the database. So here, user again casually inputs the salary and expenses to the system. System stores the data in the database. The database confirms the date that the data is stored, and then the system further confirms it to the user. So this is a very brief sketch of how the user interacts with the systems. Now, next is a scenario where a user receives notification alerts. Now here we have four systems, unlike the previous one where we had three systems. Here, this is a more broader perspective. So we have user, we have a tracking system, we have a notification system, and then we have a database system. So at first, once the user inputs the financial data to the tracking system, what happens is the data is first priorly stored to the database. So we have another activity known as monitor spending. Now, monitor spending is an activity which has been explained further in the activity diagram. So other than that, if the tracking system um, gets to know that the user is trying to exceed his limit, then the tracking system notifies it to the notification system, and the notification system alerts the database. Alerts the user, but then the database, it is automatically stored in the database because if the user has to look past to his history where he has crossed his limits, then he can easily find out from the data stored. So the notification is sent to the user via mobile pop-ups or anything like that. So here next we'll move on to activity diagram where the entire process is explained. No, the monitor, the tracking is explained basically. Um, so yeah, this is the activity diagram. So here you can see that the user inputs the financial data. It tracks the spending continuously. So spending threshold reached. Now, what happens is that they have a threshold, and once the threshold has reached, we have a decision where if it's a yes, then it analyzes how much he or she has spent. If not, it continues tracking the data, tracking the spending. So once the spending is being analyzed or the amount the budget has been analyzed, it checks for any unusual activities. Okay, so if the condition is met, then it generates notification, it generates alert and all of that, and it stores the alert in the database. If the conditions are not met, then again it starts analyzing the tracking. It starts tracking how the user is trying to spend the data. So then this process ends. So moving on to data flow diagram, we will have a broader perspective of how the system actually works. So here it provides a visual representation of the system processes. It basically represents how the data is flowing to the entire system and how this system actually works. So it's a detailed explanation. So firstly, we have three levels where we have level 0 DFT, we have level 1 DFT, and we have level 2 DFT. So level 0 DFT, it provides a very broad overview, like very concise overview of how the project is going to be. And level 1 DFT, where they mention a more detailed breakdown of how of level 0. Okay, but level 2, we have a granular breakdown of it where you have the most detailed form of how the process is going to work. So first we will look into level 0 diagram. So here we have three entities. We have the system, the user, and the database. So at first the user inputs the data, the system retrieves or stores the data within the database. And then the system further sends the report to the user. It's a very concise version of how the system works. Now, in level 1, what they have done is we have split the functions of the system as financial management, budget suggestion, and notification. So the user asks for, so the user sends the data to the financial management, and further to the budget suggestion, it generates the budget, and then notification if it exceeds the limits. Then further it is stored to the database and vice versa. Now we have shown a double-sided arrow just to show how the data flows. It's not just from user to database. If the user wants to retrieve data, it is coming back towards the user. So even if it is regarding his notification alerts or his budget or how his financial data is being stored, everything is stored in the database. So he can retrieve everything, and that is why we have provided a two-way flow diagram. Third one is level 2 diagram. So here we have explained financial management. We have divided into three parts: in input income, input expenses, and calculate total. So initially, what does the user do? He or she has two options. He or she can either input income or input the expenses, and to or input both, and based on both they calculate the total, and then after that budget is being provided. So budget suggestion is divided into analyzing financial data and generating suggestions. So analyzing financial data, and then the budget is being suggested, and then the notification again, it is generated if the budget crosses the limit or the expenses crosses the limit. So all of these is stored in the database and retrieved by the user whenever required. Next is the system architecture. Now, system architecture is we use the here we have used the data center diagram where we provide a comprehensive view of the smart monthly budget management system. It's a very technical infrastructure, and it just illustrates how various hardware and software are connected with each other. So we have the user, we have the database, we have the notification system and the suggestion system, and the system as a whole. So what happens is that the user inputs the data to the system. It is internally stored into the database, and in turn, if the budget is crossing, notification alerts are sent, and then if based on monthly precautions, the budgets are even suggested. So this is how the system works. It's a very broad perspective of how the system works as a whole. So moving on to next, we have the state diagram. Now, state diagram for the smart monthly budget system illustrate various states. So how a state is moving on to the next state, and how the transition takes place. So that is how we explain state diagram as. So it provides a clear visualization of how the system behaves in response to different user actions and system events. So we have the idle state, processing state, generating state, and display state. So moving on to the diagram. So here we can see that there is a start option, and once you start the system you will find an idle time. Now idle time expects, so here the system expects the user to log in or sign up. So here there are two processes happening simultaneously. So one process is where the user inputs the data. So once the user inputs the data, what happens is that there is processing, and then the budget is suggested, and then the result is shown. Simultaneously, your expenses is being tracked, and then it generates alert if it exceeds, and it shows the result, and finally the result is being given back to the user, and then the process ends. So then moving on to preliminary scheduling. So preliminary scheduling, we have requirement, the tasks are requirement gathering. First one that required almost 4 weeks. Requirement gathering includes stakeholder interviews and all of that. So that took for almost 4 weeks to come up with the requirements of the product, of the project. And then you have design phase. Design phase also took me 6 weeks. UI, UX designers and software designers, all of that. Development, software development team, and all of that took 8 weeks. Testing and deployment took almost 6 weeks. So moving on to the budget estimation, personal costs that include developers, UI UX designers, QA testers, and project managers. All of them are summed up to $40,500. Software licenses are mainly because we would need cloud, and we would need licenses for like just in case you're trying to build a software for this particular system, then we would need a license to give it to the public. So we can't just publish it directly, so we would need that. So that is why $1,700 for that. Hardware cost took around $10,000, for example, databases and all of that, workstations and all. And then miscellaneous 5,000, maintenance cost $10,000, and then our total estimated cost would be around $62,200. So this is how the system works, and it integrates all the components illustrated in the previous diagrams to create a seamless and user-friendly budgeting experiences. So our system provides budget calculation, data security, visual reporting, and customization. So thank you.